So, there is something going on in Turkey that's worth exploring. If you know anything about Turkey, it's probably that it's got pretty good food, sandy beaches, and that it's been ruled by the current president, Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, for the last 20 plus years, and, of course, his party, AKP. Since its creation in 2001, Erdogan and AKP absolutely cleaned house in every single election, both the generals and the locals. There has never been a single election where Erdogan and AKP did not win a plurality of the vote, except the last election.
Maalesef yerel seçim imtihanından istediğimiz, umduğumuz neticeyi alamadık.
The May 31st local elections was the only one that did not see AKP comfortably glide to victory. As a matter of fact, they lost 15 provinces, which was an absolute shock. Because back in 2023 generals, despite Erdogan being expected to lose his seat for the first time, he once again emerged victorious, giving him an immaculate electoral record. Now, by all accounts, Erdogan's victory last year was an uphill battle. The economy was in shambles. The lira had lost a whopping 77% of its value from the previous election cycle, and a devastating earthquake had just hit Turkey in February, for which the government had utterly mishandled the response.
On September 6th, 2023, two consecutive earthquakes hit South and Central Turkey. So far, over 31,000 people are reported dead.
AFAD ekipleri şu anda besniye yetişmemiş durumda. İnsanlar da elindeki çekişine murşuna bir şeyler yapmaya çalışıyorlar ama onu da bir şey yapamıyor.
Kimse gelmedi. Devlet yetkililerinden, hükümet yetkililerinden, belediye yetkililerinden kimse yok. Sadece burada halk var.
It was a perfect firestorm of electoral liability. But despite all of that, Erdogan still won. So naturally, he had an aura of invincibility around him going into this year's local elections. The main opposition party, at best, was just hoping to retain its wins from the previous election cycle and maybe grab a couple more provinces here and there. But that's not what happened. Instead, for the first time since 1977, the main opposition party, CHP, won the plurality. CHP not only had a stellar showing, but it picked up 24 provinces, and saying that it solidified its gains from the last election cycle would be an understatement. The opposition won Istanbul for the second time in a row by 12 points, and the capital of Ankara, again by 29 points. It was an absolute landslide. So AKP took a loss in the local elections. Is that really a big deal? And after all, this isn't the generals. This election will not affect Turkey's foreign policy or global markets or national legislation in any way. So does it matter? Well, one person thinks that it does, and that is President Erdogan. This election wasn't only a stain on his electoral record, it was a major hit. Currently, CHP controls municipalities that make up 64% of the country's population and governs places that make up 80% of its economic output. That means control of local governments, contracts, jobs, roads, billboards, transportation, infrastructure. But perhaps more importantly, it gives CHP an opportunity to shine for the next election. As Istanbul's incumbent mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu, put it, the main issue at hand is providing good public services now, after the election, and winning people's hearts. Asserting whether or not this means that a new day is dawning over Turkish politics would be jumping the gun. But it does mean that Erdogan no longer has the backing to rule with an iron fist. Now, if you've only ever vaguely heard of Erdogan, he isn't exactly known for being very liberal. Suffice to say, his Wikipedia page mentions the word authoritarian a lot. Erdogan likes to do things pretty unilaterally. He actually changed the country's constitution via a referendum in 2017 from a parliamentary system to a presidential system, so he could do exactly that. So last week, when Erdogan actually reached across the aisle to meet with the head of the opposition, this was significant. This is Özgür Özel. He is currently in charge of what has become the #1 party in Turkey. On May 2nd, Özel and Erdogan sat down for the first time for a quick chat. Now, this was a closed-door meeting, so reporting on what was discussed has to be taken with a grain of salt, but according to various sources, they had a pretty busy day. Reportedly, Özel kicked off the meeting by giving Erdogan a photo of prisoner Tayfun Kahraman, who got 18 years for allegedly organizing Turkey's largest mass protest to date. That's the Gezi protests in 2013, so strong start. Reportedly, Özel focused on economic issues, the social security payments for retirees, Gezi protest detainees, and the curious case of Can Atalay, who is both a Gezi detainee and an elected MP, who is technically supposed to be released from prison so he can start carrying on his ministerial duties, but isn't released. Özel kept hitting the government's lack of interest in executing the rulings by the Constitutional Court to do so, along with many other instances of the government just straight up ignoring the rulings by the Constitutional Court and the European Court of Human Rights that also ruled that Turkey must release its political prisoners relating to Gezi protests like Kahraman and Atalay, but the Turkish government simply ignores those rulings. Of course, Erdogan wasn't just listening. This was a two-way conversation. Erdogan's agenda revolved around one singular thing, and that was adopting a new constitution and essential structural changes for the country. That's right. President Erdogan wants a new constitution because the one he ushered in 2017 ended up being not so great, I guess. But what's wrong with it exactly? Why Erdogan demands a new constitution is also very much open to speculation. Erdogan says that there are inadequacies with the current constitution which must be remedied by an entirely new one. However, the opposition argues that that's not even remotely the case. See, this is theoretically Erdogan's last term. He already was president for 3 years before the 2017 referendum that changed the constitution. And he is currently serving his 3rd term, but argues that he only served 2 terms under the new constitution. So did he really serve 3 terms? The argument here is, once you change the constitution in the middle of the president's term, the game resets. The scoreboard gets erased. His previous term doesn't count. So all he has to do to serve more terms is just keep changing the constitution. Easy enough. But is the opposition as excited about the prospect of another constitution as Erdogan is? Well, it really doesn't seem that way at all. While Erdogan asked for CHP to consider a new constitution, Özel urged that actually following the existing constitution would be a great start. But that's not all. On the very same day, President Erdogan also stated, "We have entered a period of political détente." Détente is fancy for de-escalating tensions, which was only slightly late to the game because 2 days prior, on May 1st International Workers' Day, the police blocked left-wing groups from marching in Istanbul, despite the Constitutional Court ruling that they had a right to do so. If you'd like details on that story, the video should be appearing somewhere on the screen right now. Anyways, let's wrap it up. Look, there are 100 ways to interpret this as there were 100 ways to interpret the election. It is clear that Erdogan wants a new constitution. As a matter of fact, he appears to want it badly enough that he is willing to bear criticism from the opposition, something which Erdogan is famous for shutting down at every opportunity. Now, it is unclear what Erdogan will gain from the talks ahead, if anything, but conventional wisdom does say that if he thought that there was no point in entertaining the newly powerful opposition in Turkey, he probably wouldn't. Now, make no mistake, Erdogan is still very much in charge, just not to the degree that he used to be. So, is this a new day in Turkish politics? I mean, yes, because history is made pretty much every other week in Turkish politics, but it would be good to keep in mind that Erdogan is also known for his 180s. He can change his mind at the drop of a hat. But what we can definitely glean from this meeting that, well, it was an unusual meeting followed by an unusual election. And it appears that this may only be the beginning of a very interesting period in Turkey.